Nicole, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, Doug.
I always get really excited when my clients come on the shows because I have a little bit more intimate knowledge about their story, their struggle, and what they're going through. But for those that don't know you, do you mind giving a little bit of a brief intro?
Yeah, I'd love to. I think it's one of my favorite things to do is to tell people who I am because I'm really one of them. And what I mean by that is what I've done might look to somebody like, wow, okay, she's done these things, she's accomplished, she's at this certain place in her life, but it didn't start this way. So the way it started for me is I was a high school teacher and went to college to become a high school math teacher. Loved it for a while, but just realized there was something more for me and was very connected to the health and wellness world, became a health coach. And during that time, I also decided that I needed to do something different than teaching. So I left and went into the corporate world of sales, had never sold anything a day in my life, but just knew with my background, I really enjoyed competition and thought, maybe selling could be fun because it's like chasing a carrot. And if I can apply my work ethic that I had when I was a high school teacher to what I'm doing in the corporate world, that could be, really work out for me financially. And it did. And my whole goal was to become number one in the nation. And I did it within a year and a half of joining the corporate world. And then I decided I wanted to do it again. So I did it again. And then there I was with all the success and still didn't completely have a connection to that being fulfilling to me in my life the way that I thought it would be. And so then I went back to what I really loved about health and wellness and decided to become a health coach. And as I started out in my health coaching journey, what I found is that a lot of people who were health coaches like me were not doing anything with their certification. And it started to frustrate me because it is such a big vision and passion of mine to make this world a healthier place. I thought, why are you not, you're certified. Why are you not doing anything with that? And I started helping people with what I knew and had learned from the corporate world of sales. And before I knew it, it just kind of became my thing. I was the one who was helping health coaches understand how to put themselves out there and reach the people who needed them. And it felt really fun to teach them something I knew and to see them get out there and really help the people who needed them.
What's really interesting about your story is I see a lot of people and they'll associate their identity to their job.
Mhm.
And a lot that comes with that is when you want to leave to do these other things that are complete right turns and for some U turns,
Mhm.
you get a lot of pressure from outside sources like parents or friends. When you went through each of those changes, did you experience any of those like, hey, what are you doing? You've lost your mind. You lose this pension.
Yep, all
What
of it.
was that like?
Well, the first one was, I would say, the hardest, leaving my teaching job because I come from a family of educators. And not only was it kind of like a family legacy, but also, to your point, the irresponsibility of like you're leaving your pension, you're walking away. I mean, I had 15 years under my belt. It wasn't like I had just kind of dabbled in teaching. I had a legit 15-year career as a high school teacher. And it was seen as a very safe, responsible choice for me to have made. So to walk away from that, there was a lot of questioning from people who loved me and wanted to make sure that I knew what I was doing by leaving. And it wasn't easy to come to that decision, but like any big conversation that we have, that's a difficult conversation. Once we have it, it just opens up so many things. And so I found that getting the courage to have that conversation with my parents was tough. Once I did, it was like I knew I had made the right decision. And that doesn't mean it still wasn't scary, but I just knew it was my time to leave.
Do you remember what it felt like leading up to that? Because I can remember every time I've got to deliver bad news to my parents, I'm like, oh,
Right. Yeah. It felt like I was giving up. It felt like I was gonna, I mean, it doesn't matter, I don't think, how old we get in our lives. We still on some level seek validation and acceptance from the ones that love us. And I knew on some level I was gonna be disappointing my dad. I didn't even realize how obvious it was to the other people in my life that I was really unhappy. So it was more my own struggle coming to terms with that decision. And then once I had, having that conversation with my dad was still hard, but he already knew that there was a piece of me that just my heart wasn't in it anymore. And I needed to make this decision. So to be honest, I was not in a good place, like not even just taking into consideration leaving a quote unquote responsible career. I had gotten myself into debt. I had gotten myself into all kinds of situations where when I went to leave, not only was I in debt and making this huge decision to do something I'd never done before, but I was taking a huge pay cut. And I mean, as maybe some people don't know, but a lot of people do, when you go into sales, you're not going into sales for the base salary. You're going into sales for the opportunity that the commission and the big deals can bring you. But initially, those big deals aren't there. There's a lot of legwork and a lot of, acclamation that comes with jumping into a new career like that. So I knew that the finance piece was going to be a big part of it, especially in my conversation with my dad. And so I went to him and I said, listen, I have this opportunity to take a sales job and I want your help and your guidance. I respect you. I love you. And I want to know what you think of it. And he said, well, have you made a decision? And I said, yeah, I can't afford to do it, but I can't afford not to. And I just like broke down and cried. And I think he knew and he saw in me more than just being the, let me help you make a responsible decision. Let me help support my daughter. Like I know in that moment he knew I needed something different. And he said, sounds to me like you've made a decision. Let's come up with a plan.
One of the things I've seen stop a lot of people is fear. And
Mhm.
you kind of touched on it a little bit, like the fear of, what if I do fail? What if I don't make enough? And for a lot of people, that fear just stops them and they don't do anything. They don't pursue their dream. What was it like when you started to have that shift? And we've talked about this before, but into that abundance mindset. And when did you start to believe in yourself that no matter what, I'm going to find a way?
I think I always had it without acknowledging or understanding that I had it. But the big shift for me, to answer your question, was where I realized I was fighting very hard for my fears. And what I realized is it's two sides of the same coin. I can either fight very hard to justify and defend my fears, or I can fight really hard to justify and defend my desires, my dreams, what I know is speaking to me in a bigger way. And when I saw that the energy I'm putting in is going to determine what I'm creating for myself. So if I'm putting energy into my fears, then I'm creating more limitations. I'm creating more dead ends. I'm creating more stuck, frustrating situations. Versus if I just put that energy into fighting for what's possible, a lot started to change. And that's where I really took on the growth and abundance mindset.
Do you remember your first customer when you went through each change? Like when you left teaching and finally got that big deal, but more importantly, when you left that secure corporate job and became an entrepreneur? Do you remember what it felt like to land those first customers?
Yes. My I remember my very first customer in the corporate world. It was like the biggest, most exciting celebration. And looking back now, it was like a nothing account. And I don't mean to disrespect. It was exciting for me. It was my first time that I really believed, wow, I can do this. And that really wasn't the beginning of like my success just started rolling in. That was just kind of the beginning of, okay, I got one under my belt, right? I'm on the board. And what I remember more specifically is my very first big time, amazing, I knew there was something there opportunity. And it was just a very different energy. It was a very different feeling for me. And it was the customer that took me to be number one in the nation. It was the customer that personally changed my life because of what it brought opportunity wise, financial wise, everything it brought into my life. Um, and then when I left my corporate job, it was funny because I had had some pretty significant success in the months leading up to it. I was pretty fully booked with one-on-one clients, at least with the time that I had. So leaving my corporate job, I knew my time was going to expand. And what happened is I right away filled it up with no problem at all. It was like I couldn't stop my one-on-one customers from showing up. I couldn't stop, which was amazing. So it was really exciting to leave my job and have that success right away. But again, I don't want to take anything away from what I had been building up to that point. It's not like I left my job and the success just showed up. I was building the momentum. The snowball was growing as it was rolling down the hill. That was just it allowed me to serve at an even bigger level once I left my job and created more time and space.
You mentioned something in the introduction where you're talking about finding more fulfillment. And I think that a lot of people chase happiness
Mhm.
without understanding that it's really fulfillment that they're working through. How did that evolve as you went through these different stages in life? And how do you find fulfillment now in what you're doing?
Yeah. It's such a good question because I had no clue years ago. And I really thought, when I was a teacher, I had a list of all the reasons why I didn't have the life I want. Right. And one of my favorite quotes, I would even say it when I was a teacher. I would say to my students, you either have the life you want or you have the list of reasons why not. I had my reasons. And I didn't have a house by the beach. I didn't have a dog. I wasn't traveling the world. I was in debt. I did, like I had all the things that I knew were keeping me from being happy, or at least I thought. And then I jumped into the world of corporate sales. And like I said, pretty quickly, I found success. Within a year and a half, I was the top salesperson in my company. That brought a lot of money to me. I got myself out of debt. I paid off everything I needed to pay off. I got a new car. I got a house by the beach. I got a dog, and I was traveling the world. And to everybody who saw me, I had completely revolutionized my life. I had changed it. I did exactly what I told people I was going to do. I said, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go to the corporate world. I'm going to become number one in the nation. That's what I said, even before I did it. And everybody was like, wow, you're traveling the world. You have a dog. You have a house by the beach. This is so amazing. You're so lucky you did it. I was miserable inside. So here I had all these reasons that I thought that were keeping me from being happy. And once I eliminated all those reasons and I changed my life around, what really, really got me was that I still wasn't happy. And I was so convinced those were going to be the things that made me happy that when they didn't, I literally was like, you know what? If this is as good as life gets, if all those things didn't actually bring me happiness, I'm done. I'm going to check out. And it wasn't like in that moment, I was like, okay, I'm ready to kill myself. It wasn't that level for me. What it was is I understood why somebody would just want to not participate in life anymore. What's the point? If all those things didn't make me happy, what would make me happy? And it was around that time that, you said earlier something about, the ego or getting attached to your identity of who you were. I was so attached to that title of number one in the nation. I was so attached to my success that it didn't even make sense I didn't understand there could be another identity for me. And what I started to realize is I had to go back and ask myself, before I was successful, before I had all those things, what was getting me out of bed in the morning? What was making me enjoy this job before I had the title, before I had the money, before I had the dog, before I had those things? What got me out of bed in the morning? And I connected it back to two things. It was really what sales is all about for me: building relationships with people and helping them solve their problems. And when I started to connect back to those things, I get to build relationships with people every day. That's my job, getting to know people and helping them with where they're struggling with what I know how to help them with. And success started to come to me in a new way, in a different way, and in a more fulfilling way, because it wasn't about me and my ego anymore. It was about, who can I serve? Who can I help? And that's where a lot of things started to change for me. And that's as a coach and in what I do now, where I find the most fulfillment. I get to help people go after their dreams, go after their desires, and in turn, make this world a better place because of it. And that's what lights me up every day.
It's funny you mentioned that. I went through the same thing when I shifted from just trying to make as much money to acquire things
Mhm.
and just shifted to focus on like the impact you make.
Yeah.
It's amazing, like the mental, the emotional, the spiritual change that happens.
Yeah.
How would you correlate that feeling of like those first wins versus what you feel now when you see a client win?
Mm. Yeah, I had one yesterday. I was celebrating all day yesterday. If I could share this quick client win in 2019 and 2020 combined, her revenue was $11,000 combined for those 2 years. Since we started working together from the beginning of 2021 until now, she's made $40,000 in her business. That's life changing for her, her family, her husband. Like, everything about her world has completely changed because of what she's done for herself. And so for me, when I see that it's not just about success in your business, it's about your life changing completely. And not just because of the money, but what you have proven to yourself that you are able to do. The fact that she said, screw the fear, I'm going after my dreams anyways, and I'm going to make it happen. Helping somebody understand how powerful they are, that's really I think that's really where the most beautiful reward is for what we do.
That is why I believe so much in true entrepreneurship. Like
Mhm.
everyone talks about entrepreneurs, they talk about like the fast cars, the money, the private jets, like all the things you would have had with a sales job, like top of the world. But you meet real entrepreneurs like you, like people who have a true potential to have an exponential impact.
Yeah.
Like, and same, I have the same belief with small businesses. Like, they're the ones that drive a community. Like, it's so amazing to see people like you, like, contribute and give back.
Thank
In
you.
the newest role,
Mhm.
have you had any challenges or struggles? Like, how do you deal with the fears that come up now, which are very different? Like, for me, it's more imposter syndrome, or, what if I let these people down? How do you address those now and continue to move forward?
Honestly, one of my biggest secrets to all of this that I haven't even mentioned yet is investing in yourself and having the right people in your corner. And when I say invest in yourself, that could mean a lot of different things. And for me, I like to call it my success team, my dream team of people that I have in my corner on my side, whether that's in the form of a therapist, a coach, a mentor, the people that I have on my team that I work with that support me with the different aspects of my business. There's no way I could keep showing up if I was trying to do this on my own. I'd talk myself out of it. That imposter syndrome that you mentioned, that would get the best of me. I'd find myself probably crying under my bed and hiding, like it's hard to keep showing up, especially if we think we can do this on our own. And there's days where you're going to need talked off the ledge. There's days where you're going to need reminded, like, oh, I can do this. And I think relying on those people and putting yourself in the right circles is probably the most important thing that we can do.
I really hope people let that sink in. I have so many people that have just gotten bad advice and not pursued a dream. And the hardest thing is a lot of times I find it comes from people close to them,
Yeah.
like parents, friends who just could never understand or see the vision of what's possible because they still live in that box.
Right. Well, and they've bought into their own limitations. It's like the sales coach in me, just this is what quote just came up, but I like to say on every call, somebody gets sold, either them on your program or you on their excuses. And I'm going to use that quote or that analogy with the people in our lives that love us. They've just bought into their own limitations. They bought into their own excuses and they're seeing things from their lens. And it's not that they don't love you or they're trying to keep you from going after their dreams. They think that they're doing you a favor by talking you out of it because they're just seeing what their lens is showing them, which is fear, limitations, ruin. And I think one of the things that we need to understand, and this is one of the hardest parts of my journey, and I'm sure you share this too, Doug, and so do your listeners, the people that love us, what we need to learn to do is love from a distance sometimes and know that they're showing us their love in the way that they know how. But that doesn't mean that we need to buy into it from a place of they get to feel that way and we still get to have our dreams. And at the end of the day, we need to be more committed to our dreams than our comfort zone. And a lot of times, what those people that love us are speaking to is our comfort zone where they've always seen us exist. They haven't known us to be this other version. And it's scary for them when we start to branch out and become a different version. They're like, whoa, wait a minute. I had you in this box. I had you in this little container where it felt good for me. And it does say more about them than it does about us. But we can't let them keep us in that box. Ultimately, our dreams have spoken to us for a reason. They were put on our heart for a reason, and us listening to that and letting that be the loudest voice versus the people who love us trying to hold us back is really important and also one of the hardest things to do.
One of the reasons I was so excited to have you on is you were in a spot that for most people would say, oh, you got a ton of security, you have a pension.
Mhm.
And a lot of people will let that become their jail sentence. Like, oh, you can't leave this because of the other things. And now you've gone through like two really amazing opportunities. How do you find the new people as you get to the higher and higher levels? Like, how do you keep moving up and surrounding yourselves with people to push you to the next level?
Such a good question because sometimes, people are in our life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, and sometimes they've carried us as far as they can carry us, and we have to acknowledge and understand that and look at Who am I trying to become? Where am I trying to go? And who's already done it? And how can I network up? How can I put myself in their situation? You know, what's that quote? It's like if you're in a room and you look around and you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And sometimes you weren't the smartest person in that room when you started, but the way you've evolved, the way you've leveled up, you have now gotten to that state. You know, it's like, to use a sports analogy. I remember when I was on the JV team and it was like they were going to like call me up to varsity. I was the best person on that JV team. It was time because I was only going to be as good as the people I was surrounding myself with on that JV team. I had to put myself on the varsity. Well, I didn't, the coach did, but I had to put myself around other talent, other levels of talent to continue to improve who I was. And you and I've talked, you know, sports before, so I use analogies a lot with sports, but I think it's acknowledging once we've grown to a certain level and who has done what we are now trying to do and how can I put myself in their energy.
It's funny you mention that because I see so many people, they stop the investment in themselves the day they graduate.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's funny, a lot of people ask me, it's like, well, how'd you get to where you are? It's like, because I never stopped.
Mhm.
Like I'm constantly investing. And I'm not going to say like I got out of every program what I put into it.
Mhm.
A lot of times I learned what I shouldn't do.
Right.
How did you deal with those money fears of being willing to continue to invest? Because certain cases, I know a lot of them are it was well over $10,000. And for
Mhm.
most people, it's like, wow, you paid your whole tuition as after
Mhm.
like after you graduate. But
Mhm.
first, like two-part question. One, how did you get the courage to part ways with that? And two, like how do you start to assess like continuing to invest and at what level?
Such a loaded question, and I have so many things to say on it. I'll try to keep it concise because there's so many evolutions for me in this process of my relationship with money, of my understanding of wealth consciousness and money mindset that has allowed me to do what I've done. And if I had continued to stay at the level that I was at with the understanding that I had of like the real world responsible decisions with money, I wouldn't have continued to invest in myself because I would have been like, oh, I should be buying a house with this, or oh, I should, you know, I would have made one of the practical, responsible, real world decisions that you're supposed to make with those amounts of money. And the other thing I guess I should say too is it's not like I just had all those amounts sitting around waiting to be invested somewhere. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions for people is they're like, "Oh, well you like she just had the money." Or she didn't and she just leveled up and figured out a way to make it happen. And I think that's probably where a lot of people draw the line is they think once I have the money then I'll make the investment. And that's not how it works. And until you start to level up your money mindset and your relationship with money, a lot of things aren't going to change for you because you're not going to understand the value of investing because you're going to see it as once I have the money, then I'll make the investment. It's got to be there first. And the transformation happens when you find a way to make it happen, even when you don't have the money. Because, especially as an entrepreneur, let's be honest, it's all about taking risks. It's all about leveling up. It's all about being resourceful. It's all about dropping the responsible, practical bullshit mindset and saying, you know what, I'm making a decision. This is happening no matter what. And I don't need to see the physical proof. I'm going to find a way to make it happen. And adopting that, burning the ships no matter what it's happening mindset is, I think, the way that you have to continue to invest in yourself is from that space. Otherwise, it's exactly what you said. People go, okay, well, I found the money to make this happen. And once I get into this 6-month container and it's over, then I'll learn everything that I need to know and then I'll go apply it all myself. Well, most of this isn't strategy and application. Most of this is just mindset and being in the energy of the right people and knowing how valuable and important it is to continue to invest in yourself so that you can be in that energy of what's possible for you.
I 100% agree. Like I mostly because of this podcast and like the things I've been willing to invest in, I have gotten into the room with people I would have never had access to otherwise. And just being around that level of thinking
Yep.
changes your value. And what's really interesting, and I see this across the board with entrepreneurs, especially with people like you, the more you continue to push and the more you're around these people, the better the skills you acquire.
Mhm.
And so even if you invested, I don't know, $100,000,
Mhm.
you've probably acquired a multiplier of that skill.
Mhm.
Like, I don't care. You could put me, and I'm fairly, you could put me head to head with an MBA. And
Mhm.
aside from doing anything that has to do with the balance sheet or performa, like in the marketing world, like I feel like I'll be them just because I doubled down, put myself in the room with some of the best marketers in the world on a regular basis,
Yep.
much like you have in sales. And like, I think that's a lesson that I really hope people double down on to understand how important that is.
Yeah. It really is. It's the truth. It's who you put yourself around and just understanding. I mean, the experiences and opportunities that I've brought into my life because of that, because of who I've chosen to put myself around, um, is pretty significant. And I mean, like I said, networking up is one of my favorite ways to approach sales. It's like, how can I, a short story, one of the when I was still in the corporate world of sales, one of the books that I read that was just game changer for me in terms of sales is by a man named Phil Jones. And I read his book and it was called, he has a couple different ones that I read. They're all amazing. And I was reading it thinking, wow, I would love to meet him someday. I would love to have this opportunity to have a conversation with him someday. And that was in like 2017 or 2018 that I started reading his books. And then there I was about a year and a half later, and I was watching somebody's Instagram stories who I follow. And she put a story on and said, hey, in San Diego at this date, at this time, this guy, Phil Jones, is going to be doing a 1-day masterclass. And the amount of money that it was gonna, like the investment for one, I was like, whoa, okay, that's a lot of money for 1 day. But I always said I would want to meet this guy. And you know what? What opportunities is this going to bring into my world if I put myself in that room? Because here's the other thing, and I want all of your listeners to hear this. And I know you'll get this, Doug. Not only are you investing in yourself, and the way you feel about yourself because of that investment completely changes your confidence in who you are. It's like you're saying, I'm worthy of putting this much money into me, not into a new lawnmower, not into a new dishwasher. Sure, those things might be the reasonable, responsible, practical things to put your money into. But when you put it into you, you make yourself such a different version of yourself because you're saying, I care about myself so much that this investment is important for me to make in me. But here's even the more important thing, you're putting yourself around other people who also value themselves at that level. If you make an $8,000 investment, you're saying to yourself, I care about myself so much, I'm investing in me, and I'm around people who care about themselves that much. The energy that you put yourself in when you're around other people who are willing to put down that much money, it changes who you are because of who you're around. And that's what I did. I mean, here I was with Phil. I didn't even know the other guy, Clay, who happens to be a genius in his own right in marketing. And I got to spend a day masterminding with these two. Not only that, but now Phil's a friend of mine. He's been on my podcast. And now Clay and his girlfriend are going to be, and she's an influencer and an amazing person in her own right. They're going to be on my podcast. What this has brought into my world is amazing because I leveled up and said, you know what? I'm worth it. I'm going to make this investment. I'm going to figure it out. And it just put me in the room with people that I wouldn't have otherwise had the opportunity to network and get to know.
It's amazing how much that changes your life. And I don't see that when people settle into a career and they just accept, like, well, this is going to be my end destination.
Right.
And the moment we stop, like I know it's a cliche quote, but they say the moment you stop growing, you start dying.
Mhm.
Everything you've shared today is just a testament to what's possible for anybody, even if they're switching careers.
Yeah.
Before we get to the final question, where can people follow your journey and learn more about what you do?
Yeah. So I have a private Facebook group called Nicole Sales Superstars that I would love for people to join if it's something, if you're in the health and wellness world and you're looking for ways to get sales support, money mindset support. I do free trainings in there every week. Also, my Instagram account at Healthy Steps with Nicole. I'm there all the time, super active, love to connect with people there, and would love to get to know people. So please introduce yourself, step into my world.
It All of her content is absolutely amazing, and don't forget to check out her podcast, which she didn't mention. It's amazing.
Thank
And
you.
the final question I have today, what is the one lesson you can share with the listeners to inspire them to find happiness in their pursuit?
It's a question I ask myself a lot and probably a couple of times a day. It's how good are you willing to let your life get? Because it speaks to what you just said, Doug, where people enter into a, their responsible job, their corporate job, and they're like, oh, this is just how it is. This is status quo. They accept less than what they really, really desire for their life because they aren't aware of what's possible. And it's literally, how good am I willing? Not how good can my life get? Your life can get, the better it gets, the better it gets, the better it gets, the better it gets. How good are you willing to let it get? And I think that's a really important question to ask yourself all the time.
I am definitely putting that one on the wall. Thank you so much for joining me today, Nicole.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. This was really fun.